Harry's Wife, Part 104.1. Sympathy for the Spare. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Well, as always, there is plenty of commentary about the gruesome twosome that bears analysis with regard to their conduct, to help understand more about the dynamic between narcissist and victim, to dissect the various facets of Harry's wife's behaviour and also that of her husband, Prince Harry, the intimate partner primary source. I know many of you find the Harry's Wife series very interesting, but I'd also encourage you to access other of my videos also. There are way more that exist, and they cover other celebrities, but also cover other aspects of the narcissistic dynamic, which will also help you understand more about Harry's wife, even if they are not specifically about her. You'll also learn plenty about the behaviour of people that you may well have an involvement with yourself, romantically, in your family, in your workplace, a neighbour, in your friendship group. You see, my kind, we are everywhere. There are far more of us than people realise, and our numbers continue to increase. Of course, the vast majority of my kind are the unaware lessers and mid-range narcissists. Nowhere near as effective as the greaters and I the ultra, but nevertheless, you need to know about them, you need to be able to spot them, and you need to understand what makes them tick, so that you can take the appropriate steps to ensure that they don't impact upon your lives. Harry failed to do this. Harry didn't realise that along came a spider and inserted herself into every facet of his life, ruining friendships, damaging family relationships, causing him to behave in a reprehensible fashion towards the grandmother that he adored and who recently passed away, undoubtedly leaving him with regret. In the fullness of time, Harry will wake up to what he has allowed happen. Harry will at some point sit amongst the smoking ruins of his life and scratch his thinning head and think, what the fuck have I done? But before we get to that part, we of course have, in the course of the new year, his memoir, Spare, which is receiving some attention from various commentators, both pro and con. And there is an article that has come my way, courtesy of American Thinker, written by Lynn Lecter. This is demonstrative of a particular view towards the victim of a narcissist, and it is useful for the purposes of understanding more about the impact that a narcissist has, not only on the primary victim, the intimate partner primary source, but how people's views are shaped towards that victim. Let's first address the article itself, which evidences some degree of sympathy for Prince Harry. The article states as follows. From the Queen's June the 4th, 2022 Jubilee celebration, marking her extraordinary 70 years on the throne in England, to her September the 19th, 2022 funeral, my feelings towards her grandson, Harry, underwent a drastic change, leaving aside the machinations of Madame Diva, Harry's wife. The pettiness and cruelty displayed by the royal family toward him went from churlish at the Jubilee to total destruction at the funeral. The world essentially witnessed a psychological snuff film. How else can one explain what manner of people these are? His father, now King Charles, and his consort, his older brother, the heir, now known as Prince William, and his wife, Princess Kate, totally ignored Harry and his wife. Kate, who was once like a sister to Harry, now looked upon him as a leper with her pursed lips and steely, hateful gaze. The put-downs and attempts at humiliation never stopped. From the onset, Harry was not informed in a timely fashion that the Queen, his beloved grandmother, was dead. From their ghosting and non-communication to being seated in the equivalent of the cheap seats, to the petty insults of not allowing Harry to wear his military uniform, to finally allowing him to wear the uniform for a brief time, albeit with Her Majesty's initials removed, to not being allowed to salute the Queen's coffin, even though he had served in the military for a decade, to being uninvited to a private reception after purportedly having been invited in error. The King's knives were definitely out. Throughout, Harry's visage was one of profound grief, Harry's wife stoic, but they never raised a word of complaint and bore their humiliation with quiet dignity. Now, I dare say, as I provide you with my observations, that there are those of you that, say, bore their humiliation with quiet dignity, poppycock. All they've done is complain thereafter about the way that they were treated, and they deserved everything that they got. Understand, Prince Harry is in the grip of a narcissist. He's no saint himself, but he's gone from being a chap that many people found likeable to one that's being roundly ridiculed, indeed detested, as a consequence of his selfish behaviours, as his strong narcissistic traits have come to the fore with the erosion of his emotional empathy as a consequence of the way that he's been puppeted by his wife. Notice also how once upon a time many people felt sorry for Prince Harry. He lost his mother in tragic circumstances as a young age and seemed somewhat lost. But now, although his wife came along and said, "I will guide you," many people have found their sympathy for him have evaporated. This is something that can be quite common with regard to a victim of a narcissist. The reason is that, first of all, as a consequence of their ensnarement and the tunnel vision that they acquire, the victim invariably seems focused only on the narcissist and complicit in the ruinous relationships that then arise. They appear to take the narcissist's side, falling out with family, falling out with friends, only turning to family and friends when they actually need something, having waved them away at an earlier juncture. Such complicity is understandably a place that the other victims of the narcissist, those friends and family members, go to. Indeed, it can often cause those friends and family to question the bona fides of that primary victim themselves, indeed wondering, are they of the same ilk as the narcissist that has secreted themselves into the dynamic? And this is what has happened with Harry. Although the writer of this article is sympathetic to him, and there are those that are remaining sympathetic to the victim, many do not. Here, the sympathy is not so much that of he's a victim of his wife, at least so far in this article, although it is recognised that she engages in machinations, and that was stated in the opening paragraph, but more as a consequence of feeling sorry for Harry as a way that his family have treated him. But this is no surprise. His behaviour is such that it has merited the put-downs, because he has to be dealt with alongside his wife. Returning to the article. Thus, the announcement of Harry's bug, Spare, is well understood by Anglophiles. For years, Harry's older brother, Prince William, was called the heir, and Prince Harry was known as the spare. All attention was lavished on William as the future king, and Harry was treated as the backup, the spare, just in case something happened to William. Harry was not treated with respect for himself personally, but just as a spare battery, in case the battery in the remote control died. And yet, despite his wild child years, Harry went on to live a life of valour and dignity. He served in the military for 10 years, with 2 spells in Afghanistan, and founded the Invictus Games, an Olympic-style event for athletes with disabilities. Making the facts of birth, rank, and royal succession more painful for Harry was the constant buzz about his parentage. His father Charles had a thing with now-wife Camilla Parker Bowles from a young age, but Camilla wasn't one to wait forever and married someone else with whom she had children. That union seemingly damned her forever, as ineligible to subsequently marry Charles. Charles went on to marry the innocent, unblemished, virginal, and beautiful Diana, of whom his parents approved. Although they had 2 children, their marriage was doomed from the start, because Charles was unwilling to part with his obsession for Camilla. Notice his need for control over her. Eventually Diana knew the truth, and after bearing the heir and the spare, sank into a depression for which he finally broke out and became a global icon. Charles, a 2-timer and jealous, could not compete with Diana's beauty, charm, empathy, and warmth. Moreover, aware of Charles' duplicity, Diana began a series of her own affairs, the own diminution of her own emotional empathy as a consequence of Charles's behaviour towards her. One of which to this day causes titters regarding Harry's paternal genesis, a conflict that might contribute to Charles's hateful behaviour towards his own son, as Harry bears a striking resemblance to one of Diana's lovers, James Hewitt. But historians swear that Diana didn't meet Hewitt until 2 years after Harry's birth. It's also the case, I would add, that if you look at Harry, he very much resembles his father Charles. Regardless, Harry's choice of book title shouts volumes. He appears to be addressing the hurt of forever being called the spare, of seeing photos on his grandmother's and father's desks of Queen Elizabeth, Prince Charles, Prince William, and William's first son, Prince George. Any child would be hurt by such omission, a hurt multiplied exponentially on the world stage. One hopes the book will provide Harry a catharsis of sorts and the facilitation of new paths to explore and conquer. Now, the writer of this article is well-intentioned, but mistaken, because this book is not done for a catharsis, it's done for money, and he's been driven into doing this. Why? Why had he not written these memoirs much earlier? Or waited, perhaps? Why now? Well, quite simply, the need for money. And who has persuaded him of this? His wife. Harry probably hadn't contemplated doing this before, because even though he did have considerable resentment towards his father for his behaviour and to Camilla for her having an affair with his father, the fact is he wasn't motivated to throw pelters at the royal family because he was very much a part of it, and that was to his advantage. However, when along came the spider, who needed to assert control over him and thus wrest him away from the control of others within the family, this meant that she had to utilise his vulnerabilities, to cause him to believe that she was there to care for him, that she could see clearly that he was trapped and needed to be removed from this, and he fell, as you know, for it hook, line and sinker. Blinded by her manipulations, blinded by his own emotional thinking, he was very much a susceptible victim. This author believes that he merits sympathy. Many do not. And a brief excursion below the line in the comments section, Annie Fields writes, "I'm sorry, zero sympathy. He made his choices. He can live with them." John Watson, he is controlled by his failed actress wannabe gold-digging wife. To gain and maintain fame, she will do anything. Yes, I feel sorry for Harry, but for a different reason. Sadly, he made a poor choice. Orpheus descending. I agree with you there, John, but having made that mistake once myself, I feel someone should eventually be forgiven. After all, what was all that nonsense about royal grace? Her Majesty was generally quite graceful in her life. Everyone should be so well-bred, but alas, so few are. Okay, Harry fouled up and continues to reign unrepentant, but still. Charles Wallace, they tossed any honour or dignity on the set of Oprah's show. Boo fucking who. Robert Cunningham, cry me a river. This loser and his wife gave up the trappings of royalty to go to Hollywood, to be around her friends and to try to restart a worthless career. To sympathise with them was just a useless puff piece for American Times. Frank Haynes, on multiple counts, he's obviously not thinking straight. And if there's one thing I cannot abide, it's feel sorry for oneself. Seriously, we have got much bigger fish to fry. Limited sympathy there for Harry, and this is a position that many victims find themselves in, that as a consequence of other people not knowing who they're ensnared with and their own behaviours becoming despicable, hateful, reprehensible as a consequence of the impact of the narcissist, they start to dig their own grave, and any sympathy that might have existed for them starts to erode. And this is where Harry finds himself. He finds himself in a place that many primary victims of narcissists do, particularly from those who do not understand that this is a dynamic between narcissist and victim. Those that do are more likely to be able to realize that whilst he's not completely blame-free, he was unaware of what captured him in the first place. He's unaware of what is truly influencing his behaviors, and he is not yet ready to wake up from all of that. And thus, those that have had an involvement with narcissists are more likely to look at this with a greater degree of sympathy for him. Those who do not just think that he's a spoiled brat who's found his soulmate in Harry's wife and is behaving in a similar way to her, and therefore deserves no sympathy. The fact is, he is a victim of her behaviours. He is a victim of her narcissism. And where you see any potential sympathy in that regard, of course, is entirely a matter for you. What is important for you to understand, that she ensnared him and has influenced him thereafter, as is often the case for many victims. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.